Spy media has long captivated audiences from all generations. From the many okay Bond movies, to the somewhat more questionable Spy Kids, or even for the animation enthusiasts out there, the recent hit Spy Family, or for the true connoisseurs, the Austin Powers movies. And it's not hard to understand why spy movies are so popular. It's always been an alluring image. The high roller lifestyle, the fancy gadgets, thrilling gunfights, and, most importantly, the secret codes and hidden communications. And while spycraft and its uses for cryptography have been around for many thousands of years, dating back to as early as 1750 BC, musical cryptography is a much more recent invention, as far as we know. While music has been around, presumably since the dawn of mankind or shortly after, the usage of musical cryptography was hampered by one small issue. Musical notation did not really exist for a long time. While the ancient Greeks around 100 BC had a system of music notation that they used, it had long fell out of use by around 500 AD, when a Roman man named Boethius wrote down that the notes were named from the letters A to O. And so, when Guido of Arezzo came about only around 500 years later, and invented staff notation, it was a comparatively short 400 years after that where our story begins. But before we start, let's take a quick step back. What is cryptography? And what are musical cryptograms and musical ciphers? The definition Wikipedia gives for cryptography is the practice and study of techniques for secure communication in the presence of adversarial behavior. For a musical cryptogram is a cryptogrammatic sequence of musical symbols, which can be taken to refer to an extra musical text by some logical relationship, usually between note names and letters. Music ciphers. In cryptography, a music cipher is an algorithm for the encryption of a plain text into musical symbols or sounds. Now, musical cryptograms and musical ciphers may sound similar. However, musical cryptograms are sequences used to create themes or motifs that represent something, while music ciphers are used to hide specific messages for secrecy or espionage. With those definitions cleared up, let's move into the history. Damaged and obscured by years of dampness, in a collection of medieval manuscripts stored at the libraries at the University of Oxford, there sits a collection of sermons from a man named Friar Nicholas Philip. While not much is seemingly known regarding Friar Philip, this collection of sermons is historically significant for another reason. In this collection seems to be one of the first recorded examples of a musical cipher. The cipher is relatively simple, using only 5 total notes, but relying on rhythmic duration to portray other letters. For example, when the system is built off of the quarter note, the letters B, C, D, F, and G are equal to quarter notes, in a descending line of B, A, G, F, and E, respectively, as can be seen here. A, E, I, O, and U are eighth notes in an ascending line of E, F, G, A, and B, while K, L, M, N, P, and Q, R, S, T, Z are half and whole notes in ascending and descending lines, respectively. You will notice that is only 20 notes, because there are a few exceptions. J is an eighth note G with a staccato, while V and W are both eighth note Bs with staccatos. These 3 letters weren't originally in the cipher, but were added as substitutions by the person that put together an encoder for the cipher, which will be in the description of this video. X is the weirdest exception, as it is a half note B and a whole note G. Not really sure about that one. Y is also an eighth note G with a staccato. Now, the keenest viewers will recognize that we're still missing a letter. I'll give you a second to guess. If you said H, congratulations. Going back to the opening of this section, you'll recall that this collection is badly damaged. H is supposed to be represented as an accidental, either a natural or a sharp, but it's unclear which one it is supposed to be, so the encoder just lists it as an H on the staff. Based on everything I've told you, let's see if you can decode this message. Let me know in the comments if you managed to get it right. Sources do dispute the exact time our next piece was written. Because so little is known about the life of the composer, Josquin de Prez, it can be difficult to chronologically place his works. However, scholars have made the claim that it was either written in a period of 18 months between 1480 and 1481, or in a similar period between 1503 and 1504, both arguing stylistic reasons, of course. The piece we'll discuss next, the Missa Hercules Dux Ferrare, is a unique example of a 4-part mass that Josquin wrote. Unlike his other works, which bounce back and forth between homophonic and polyphonic passages, and can change modes during the length of the mass, the Missa Hercules is rigid and consistently in a single of the early church modes. And the mass is unique in another manner, as it is the first and most famous example of a technique known as soggetto cavato. This technique, originally known as soggetto cavato dalle vocali di queste parole, known in English as a subject carved out of the vowels from these words. This technique relies on the work of someone we've already discussed briefly, Guido of Arezzo. Guido, as a pioneering music teacher, proposed something today we call solmization syllables, which were assigned to help the singers learn to sight sing. These vowels, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, and la, are used to assign the pitches used in a musical work, creating the soggetto cavato. For example, in Josquin's Missa Hercules, the soggetto cavato is carved out of the words Hercules dux ferrare. Her as re, Q as ut, les as re, dux as ut, fe as re, ra as fa, re as mi, and a as re. So Hercules dux ferrare becomes re, ut, fa, mi, re, which is used as the cantus firmus for the Mass. It can be seen pretty clearly in the opening of the piece's Kyrie, first in the superius voice, before moving to the tenor voice in measure 9. So, in summary, the soggetto cavato technique relies on transposing vowel sounds into solmization syllables, which then assigns them to pitches. Jumping forward over 100 years, we get to one of the most prominent examples of a musical cipher, which has been used up until today by countless composers in over 400 recorded examples. In the Germanic tradition, notes are mapped by note names, like we might expect. A, B, C, D, E, F, and G are commonly known as A, B flat, C, D, E, F, and G in modern nomenclature. And many might recognize that the B natural is commonly called H in this German system. Which brings us to the most prominent and next example, the B-A-C-H motif. Pioneered by Johann Sebastian Bach, one of the most famous composers of the Baroque era, Bach used this B-flat A-C B natural motif in numerous of his works, with later commentators apparently writing, "The figure occurs so often in Bach's bass lines that it cannot have been accidental." And it was in fact attributed to him in a 1732 biography of Bach published during his life. This figure is in everything from the Brandenburg Concerto No. 2 to the Art of the Fugue, and that's just in Bach's own work. It follows in the works of Robert Schumann, Franz Liszt, Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov, Arnold Schoenberg, Anton Webern, Alfred Schnittke, Charles Ives, Johannes Brahms, and many more, with composers still today continuing to use it in homage to J.S. Bach. And this system of using the German naming of notes is pervasive. You can find its use in the music of many prominent composers, such as the likes of Dmitri Shostakovich, with his use of the D, E-flat, C, B natural, spelling out D-S-C-H in the German nomenclature. Robert Schumann's S-C-H-A, played as E-flat, C, B natural A, and even in the famous 21st century modern living composer, Austin Kovalarczyk, who uses a motif based off of his name in his saxophone quartet, Self-Portrait, A natural, B natural, D, B flat, C, and A. So while this is a rather old and obvious system for many of us, it's stuck around for a long time for good reason. When discussing cryptography and music, there is one composer that must always come up. Known for his interest in cryptography and codebreaking, Edward Elgar is considered one of the top British composers of his time. Known for his violin and cello concertos, his 2 symphonies, the Pomp and Circumstance March, and most importantly, his Enigma variations, Elgar's interest in cryptography was a major part of both his life and compositional output, which is most evident in what today might be considered his most famous work, Variations on an Original Theme, better known as the Enigma Variations. Before discussing that piece, it's relevant to mention just how obsessed with cryptography, ciphers, and word puzzles Elgar truly was. At one point in 1896, it's purported that he solved a cryptogram that the inventor claimed no one could ever solve, in a single night. Along with that are multiple instances of ciphers and such that Elgar himself created, such as the Dorabella cipher, which, even up to today, has no accepted solution. It defies traditional methods of cipher cracking, and continues to puzzle cryptographers across the globe, much like Elgar's masterpiece. The Enigma Variations is a 30-minute long suite, comprised of a theme and 14 variations on it, with each variation dedicated to, and written in the style of, as Elgar puts it, each of the friends pictured within. While this in itself is technically a number of musical cryptograms, due to extra musical references associated with each variation, the biggest mystery surrounding the Enigma Variations is the titular enigma of the piece. According to Elgar's own statements, the main theme heard in the piece, also known in the Enigma Variation, is not the principal theme. Further, through and over the whole set, another and larger theme goes, but is not played, so the principal theme never appears. The mystery here is, then, what is the principal theme? And that truly is Elgar's greatest secret, encoded for decades after his death. As it stands, though hundreds of solutions have been proposed, there is no definitive answer, with every solution so far having flaws from various experts in the field. Of the many French composers in the last 100 years, there are none that can claim a career as diverse and unique as Olivier Messiaen. As a pedagogue, his students include some of the most well-known composers in the world, such as Johannes Kexanis and Karl-Heinz Stockhausen. His personal experiences, from teaching at the Paris Conservatory to being interred at a German prisoner of war camp during World War II, to his transcriptions of birdsong and his chromesthesia, his perception of colors when he hears chords, all blended with many various inspirations and influences, all lead to a diverse output of fascinating music. One of his most interesting works, and one of the ones most relevant to this video, is his Meditations on the Mystery of the Holy Trinity, originally titled in French. Messiaen is one of the few composers who created a cipher to match the style he already wrote in, producing this cipher, which, as seen here, uses a method he proposed based on the concept of one sound, one register, one duration. To keep things simple, he removes all articles, pronouns, adverbs, and prepositions from the texts, using a style known as Latin declension, where in the case of each word is shown beforehand using a musical formula. The genitive, ablative, and locative cases are represented by a sequence: dotted 8th note E-flat 3, dotted 8th note F3, dotted 8th note E4, quarter note tied to a 16th note F-sharp 4, while accusative and dative cases are represented by the sequence dotted 8th note F3, dotted 8th note B-flat 3, dotted 8th note E4, quarter note tied to a 16th note E-flat 3. The The privative case, a 16th note A4 and an 8th note B flat 3. Être, the French verb meaning to be, and thus Messiaen's way of displaying the concept to be, is a dotted 8th note D sharp 5, dotted 8th note C sharp 5, dotted 8th note D4, in a downward movement, since, in his words, all that is comes from God. While avoir, or the concept to have, is represented by the upward movement of dotted 8th notes F sharp 3, dotted 8th note G sharp 3, dotted 8th note G4, as we can always have more by lifting ourselves up to God. Thus, Messiaen also includes the musical theme for God, which is a prominent one in his works. A whole note B4, 8th note A4, 16th note E flat 4, 8th note A flat 3, 8th note B flat 3, 8th note E4, dotted 8th note F sharp 4, quarter note G3, half note C sharp 3, which on occasion is also presented in the retrograde inversion. This cipher, presented in full at the start of the score for the Meditations on the Mystery of the Holy Trinity, is first seen in use on page 10, in the 4th section of the first meditation. Here we first see the figure for the dative case in measure 2 of the first stave, which is followed by the text Personnes procédant, which is the beginning of a quote from the Part 1, Question 33, Article 4, conclusion of St. Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica. Throughout the piece are more and more examples, and helpfully the letters are written above the staff whenever the cipher is in use, and text denotes the case when such sequences are presented. I hope you've enjoyed this very quick look into the wide world of musical cryptography and musical ciphers. To this day, there is more research and composition done with these techniques and new ones in mind, such as the Sol-Fa cipher, created by David Loberg Code, which is a modern example of a musical cipher. Or, in composition, any of the background music you've heard in this video. Each piece was written with the technique being discussed at that point in the video. If you've enjoyed this brief history, please feel free to like and subscribe, or check out any of my similar dives into other topics, like alternative music notation and Zen harmonic music. Let me know in the comments, did you know any of these codes? Do you know others that I haven't mentioned? Or feel free to just leave your thoughts on the subject. I'd love to hear them. And that's all. So thanks. I'll see you next time.